new guy. Here we go!
Hey guys, it's MegaRobert from MegaRobertTV, and today I'm going to review the two new Ben 10 episodes, Waterfilter and the Ringleader. So Waterfilter starts out where Grandpa Max is taking Ben and Gwen to Niagara Falls, and once Ben realizes that Niagara Falls is just a giant waterfall, he's like, when I get there, I gotta jump off of this thing. And Gwen, of course, is like, listen, Ben, you need a filter, and as your cousin, I've decided that any decision you make, you need to run it by me first. And Ben's like, I don't need a filter, I have my Ben tuition. Not his intuition, his Ben tuition. And Grandpa Max is like, Ben, you know, maybe it's a good idea if you run some of your ideas by Gwen sometimes. Maybe it'll help out in the end. And Ben, still against it, is like, all right, you know, we'll do it like that from now on. But later that night, when the RV is parked, he sneaks out, turns into Cannonball, and jumps off of Niagara Falls. And he doesn't get hurt or anything, but when he crashes into the bottom, he wakes up a monster known as the Hydromander. And it doesn't wake up right away, but in the morning, when everybody gets up, that Hydromander, that giant lizard monster, is completely devouring the entire city. And Gwen, of course, is a little bit suspicious. She's like, all right, I think somebody without a filter might have woken this thing up. And Ben, trying to ignore it, is just like, let me fix this right now. And he's dialing up the Omnitrix. And what he realizes is that he comes across an alien he's never used before. And he's like, I gotta use this new guy. And Gwen is like, Ben, listen to your filter. Don't use a new alien. Use an old guy like Heat Blast or Diamond Head. This is no time to try to learn new superpowers. And Ben is like, Gwen, I know you're trying to help, but my Ben tuition is telling me that I gotta use this new guy. So he slams down on the Omnitrix and he turns into a brand new alien, Overflow. So Overflow is actually not a new alien. He's actually just Water Hazard from the old Ben 10 show, rebooted for the new one. And he's also kind of the replacement for Ripjaws because Ben doesn't have that alien from the original show anymore. And the thing that I miss about Ripjaws that Overflow doesn't have is that Ripjaws had a lot of weaknesses, like on land, if he wasn't hydrated, or if he was in the middle of the desert, then Ripjaws was in some serious trouble because he needed water to stay alive, and it kind of added this layer of like scariness to the show, like, will Ben survive without water as Ripjaws? But Overflow is like the complete opposite. He's like the best of both worlds. And there's actually a really funny scene in this episode where the Hydromander grabs Overflow and drags him underwater, and as they're going down, Ben is like, oh man, I'm drowning, I'm not gonna get out of this. And he's like, wait a second, this guy can breathe water too? This is awesome. And then he starts fighting the Hydromander again. But it's really true that Overflow is like this super strong alien, and he's like nowhere near the fragileness that Ripjaws was. And even though I'm gonna miss that from Ripjaws, Overflow is actually a pretty cool alien. So the episode continues where Overflow is fighting the Hydromander, and then the Hydromander starts replicating into multiple tiny Hydromanders, and Overflow, you know, Ben doesn't know how to use him well that yet. So Overflow's fighting and he's kind of hitting himself in the head with his own water blast, and it's not working out. So he's like, Gwen, what do? I need your filter. And Gwen's like, well, do what I was telling you the whole time. Use an old alien like Heat Blast. So Ben turns into Heat Blast and starts fighting these little Hydromanders, but after a while they drag him under the water, and because Heat Blast is made of fire, he starts actually drowning. And Gwen's like, oh man, I'm supposed to be his filter and I gave him the wrong advice. And you know, Ben, now in the water, is like, Gwen, what do? I need your filter. And Gwen's like, you don't need my filter, Ben. You need your Ben tuition. Just do what you've always been doing. Your Ben tuition is totally Ben-tuitive. And she's like, what am I saying? Ben, just use Overflow again. So Ben changes into Overflow, starts fighting the Hydromanders, throws them onto land where they disintegrate. He beats them all, and you know, the day is saved. So it was a pretty fun episode. From what I've heard online, this is actually supposed to be the premiere episode of the Ben 10 reboot, and it was something like the airing dates on Cartoon Network got all mixed up. But I would actually believe that because Ben 10 usually has a knack for introducing new aliens in the first episode, like in Ben 10 Omniverse. The first episode had Ben turning into Feedback. So it would make sense that the first episode of the reboot would be Ben turning into Overflow. So the next episode, the Ringleader, is where Ben and Gwen are playing sumo slammers, and Ben beats Gwen in the video game, and Ben's kind of celebrating like, yeah, I'm a champion. But then Gwen is like, man, I really wish I could invalidate your victory. That's exactly what she says. And Grandpa Max is like, well, could you really call it a victory, Gwen? I mean, Ben just beat you at video games. Like, that's not a real victory. And Ben's like, Grandpa, what are you trying to say, that I'm not a real champion? And Grandpa's like, yeah, well, you know, it was just video games. If you wanted to be a real champion, you'd have to be a real wrestler. And then, you know, Grandpa Max goes to sleep. He's just trying to give his grandkids some advice. But Ben actually takes it seriously, and he's like, I gotta be a real wrestler. So he comes up with this whole costume, and he turns into forearms, and he's like, I'm gonna be the Crusher and win the Midwest wrestling champion and prove to Grandpa that I am a champion. And then Gwen is like, Ben, you know, isn't this kind of cheating? And, you know, Ben's like, I didn't really think of it like that. And then Gwen goes on her phone, and she's like, wait a second, you win $1,000 if you win the championship. Let's do this. So they go to the Midwest Wrestling Championship stage, and then, you know, Gwen has on her sweater. She's talking like someone from Rocky. She's like, they're gonna go low on you, kid. You gotta win. And Ben's like, what are you doing, Gwen? And she's like, well, this is how the coaches sound in the movie, so this is what I gotta do. And Forearms actually builds up this kind of rivalry with Iron Kyle, the standing champion of the wrestling tournament. And in the finals, once it's Forearms versus Iron Kyle, they actually start getting into a pretty awesome fight until Forearms turns back into Ben right in the ring as Iron Kyle is fighting him. And the spectators are just like, would you believe it, everybody? The Crusher has transformed into a 10-year-old kid. And then Ben is just running around the ring as Iron Kyle is chasing him down. And then Ben transforms into Overflow and blasts Iron Kyle's middle arms with a ton of water blast. And Iron Kyle's suit actually starts glitching out, and Iron Kyle himself falls apart because he's actually just a metal machine controlled by a teenage kid. And at this point, the spectators are like, all right, the Crusher's a 10-year-old kid, and Iron Kyle is just some teenager in a suit. What is going on here? And both of them actually get disqualified for misuse of alien technology and misuse of metal arms and a metal bodysuit. So Iron Kyle and Ben both get kicked out of the wrestling stadium, and then Ben's like, Iron Kyle, how could you do this? You know, how shallow do you have to be to build a metal suit to win a wrestling tournament? And then Kyle's like, you're one to talk, mister. I have a watch that turns me into aliens. And after a while, they're like, there's only one way we're gonna actually settle our match. And then it flash forwards later where Iron Kyle and Ben are playing video game sumo slammers, and then Ben wins in the end. And Gwen's like, you really think this is a victory still? And Ben's like, yep, I'm a champion. And Grandpa Max wakes up, and he's like, who's this kid standing here? So this one was a really funny episode, and I think it's my favorite one so far. And this episode, The Ringleader, I think is actually based on an original Ben 10 episode called Ready to Rumble. But this episode, even though it has just as much action, it actually has more funny jokes in it than the one from the original series. Like here we actually have Gwen trying to be the coach from Rocky, and you also have Forearms hiding two arms behind his back, you know, trying to pretend like he's a normal guy, even though, you know, he's obviously an alien with 4 arms. And then, you know, you have so many funny jokes on top of that. And, you know, I really like where the new Ben 10 show is going, and I'm really enjoying these episodes, and I can't wait to see more. So yeah, guys, question of the day. What do you think about these 2 new episodes, and what do you want to see in the next 2 episodes? So yeah, guys, this is Mega Robert signing off.
Up top!